Me again. Hey, fourth grade. So we're going to do a little bit of religion today. It's been a while since I talked to you about Lent. You started Lent with Mrs. Hummel while I was on Kairos. And I want to recap what you did with her. And then we're going to go on so that we can learn why we do things that we do during Lent. Why do we see the things that we see? Why do we do some of the cool things that we do in the Catholic Church? They all have meaning, and a lot of the meaning goes back to when Jesus was here walking the earth. So it's really cool to kind of look back at the Bible and see the connection between what we do now and what they did a long time ago. So the first thing you talked about, so I'm going to tell you what you need to start this lesson, and then you are going to pause the video and you're going to go get it. So you need your religion notebook, you need a pencil, and you need the paper from the computer. So in the email that I sent you this morning, I have the paper that you need for today. Hopefully you could print it out and you can write in it. If you can't do that today, then I will send you another piece of paper tomorrow that has the answers in it. So don't worry if you can't get it, but if you can get it, have that paper with you so you can write in and fill in the blanks, a pencil so you can write, and your religion notebook so that we can tape or glue them into those spots. Okay, so pause the video and go get those things. Okay, welcome back. I want you to flip back to the page that looks like this. Anna, I don't think you were here that day. I'm including this page in the video or in the email so that you can put that in your notebook if you'd like. And then you should have on the next page notes that say Lent is 40 days long. Why? Why do we pick 40? 40 is a number in the Bible that we talk about a lot because they use it for, or God used it for, a period of waiting and sometimes hardship while people waited, and sometimes preparation, like we're preparing for something. So that's what that 40, that number means. And if you look back in the Bible, and Mrs. Hummel probably talked to you about this, you find lots of numbers of 40, lots of times when 40 is used. So first one, say it for me, Great Flood, right? So the Great Flood reigned for 40 days and 40 nights when God flooded the world. And during that time, Noah was in that ark with his family and all of those animals, and they were waiting. And I would imagine it'd be hard. And I would imagine it would be something similar to what we're doing now. Waiting in our houses, stuck, a little bit stuck. But Noah had faith, just like we have faith. Faith that at one point he's going to send that beautiful dove out, and it's going to come back like it did with the palm branch, a little palm branch in its beak, to show that there was land showing, no more water, no more flood. So we're kind of waiting like that too during this Lent as we wait in our homes. Kind of a neat connection. It took 40 years for Moses to lead the Israelites through the desert until they got to the promised land. So 40 years, hardship in the desert, hardly any food. They had to wait for God to give them manna from above. They couldn't just go to their fridge and get food, right? When they were walking through the desert. Actually, they didn't have fridges back then, but they didn't have food. They didn't have shelter. They had to make their own while they were out in that desert, wandering around until they could get to the promised land. So it was 40 years that they waited. This is a cool one. When Moses left the people in the desert and went up to the mountain to get the 10 commandments, he waited for 40 years. That's look in your notes. If you're following along in your notes, you can see all of these things that we wrote in your notes when Mrs. Hummel was here. So Moses waited on the mount for 40 days for God to give him the 10 commandments, the law. And then he came down the mountain, and what did he find? The naughty Israelites making golden calves, and being naughty and not following the rules. He's like, I just waited for 40 days for these 10 commandments and you're breaking them already. Jesus's preparation for his public ministry. He waited in the desert. We talked about this on Ash Wednesday when I read the Jesus book, and we read that story of Jesus as he came down to John the Baptist, remember? And John the Baptist turned around, like he paused for a second because he could feel Jesus behind him. And he's like, oh my goodness, there he is. And there was Jesus right behind John the Baptist. And he turned around and Jesus wanted John the Baptist to baptize him. And John the Baptist is like, no, I'm just a humble servant. I can't even put your sandal straps on. I'm not even worthy to do that. And so John the Baptist baptized Jesus because Jesus told him to, and he had to do what Jesus told him to. So John the Baptist baptized Jesus, and then Jesus left and went to the desert to prepare his heart for his public ministry. So he was in the desert, and remember, that's when the devil came and tempted Jesus those 3 times. We'll talk about that a little bit later. After Easter, Jesus walks on the earth for 40 days before he ascends back into heaven. And we'll talk about that a little bit later after Easter time. But that's another 40 days. So all of those moments in the Bible, those times in the Bible where God uses the number 40 to represent waiting, which is why Lent is 40 days. We're waiting, we're preparing. It's a little bit of hardship. If you gave up candy, if you gave up playing video games, if you are trying to be nice to your sister or your brother, now it's really hard because they're in your house. You guys are together all the time. So it could be even harder. So it's a little bit of a hardship. It's a little bit of a trial. It's us trying to do something better so that we prepare ourselves for Easter. So 40 days. That's why Lent is 40 days. So that's our first tradition that we use in Lent, 40 days. Think way back to Ash Wednesday. Remember Ash Wednesday, and Father Coyle came and said Mass, and we got the ashes on our head. And we talked that day about why ashes? Why do we use ashes? And we use ashes because in biblical days, when people sinned, they would wear itchy clothing. Sometimes they would kneel in itchy spots, sometimes in ashes, and that would be their way of repenting, of feeling their sin. So that's one thing about ashes. Another thing about ashes is that Adam was created from dust. So everything that God created the dust. And then from out of the dust came this beautiful creation that he has made for us. So the ashes on our forehead remind us that we are dust. We're created from dust, and unto dust someday we shall return. So it reminds us that we're human. It reminds us that we have an end to life on earth. And then when we think about the end of life here on earth, we also think about the beginning of life in heaven. So it's like the end here, but God always gives us the beginning, the next beginning. Kind of like us right now, waiting in our homes. We're waiting. We can't be at school right now. You can't go play soccer with your friends and on your team. We can't play softball and baseball games. We can't go play our AAU tournaments. There's that waiting. But like Father Coyle said in Mass on Sunday, I don't know if any of you watched it, but he talked about the day that we get to go back to school, or the day that we get to play that first baseball game, or the day we get to go back to church that first time. It's going to be awesome. So that's like the new beginning. So even though we're waiting, we have a new beginning. So if you look back at your paper, Lent begins with Ash Wednesday. We put ashes on our forehead in the shape of the cross that Jesus used to sacrifice himself for us. It reminds us that we're sinners, that we have an end to this life. Sometimes the priest says, turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. That's on your notes in there. We're on part 2. It says Lent begins with Ash Wednesday that you did with Mrs. Hummel, and I'm just going through those notes. It reminds us that we are human. So it reminds us what we're sinners. It reminds us that we are human when the priest says, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And I think it's so cool that the palms come, or the ashes come from the palms being burnt And those palms were from last year's Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday's coming up for us for this year. And then after Palm Sunday, you save your palms. And then next year at Ash Wednesday, you take your palms back to church and they get burnt. And then they use those as the ashes from your forehead or for your forehead. So it's like that end to the palms. And it gets put on our foreheads as the new beginning for Ash Wednesday, for Lent, as we prepare for the next Easter. So when you look at some of the things that we do in the church, it's really kind of cool because they all have meaning. All those things have meanings. Yesterday, you had to, I should say Tuesday, because you might be watching this video on a different day. So Tuesday, I asked you to draw a word that I can't say. Hopefully you'll know from this. No blank during Lent. So we drew it yesterday, and I saw some of your pictures. They were beautiful. We drew that, and then we hid it somewhere in the house. You're supposed to actually do it on Ash Wednesday, but Ash Wednesday was kind of crazy, and then I was leaving, and Mrs. Hummel was there. So, and then we left, and here we are trying to learn from home. So I had to kind of change our timeline up a little bit. But you still have that word. You colored it, you made it beautiful, and hopefully you hid it somewhere so that at the end of this time, this 40 days of preparation and waiting and hardship, hopefully we get to pull that beautiful word out, and maybe you can hang it up somewhere in your house on that Easter Sunday, and it could be like, Easter's here. Okay? So why do we put it away? Why don't we say that word during Lent? Well, first we have to think about what it means. So I want you to get that paper that you have. It looks like this. Okay, so it should say number 3. We take a break from the blank. Okay, if you have this paper, you are going to take notes right now. If you don't have the paper, you're just going to listen and you're going to watch me write the notes, and then you'll be able to print out the paper hopefully later. If you don't have a printer, I'll ask your mom and dad to save the document and you can study from there, okay? And then when we get back to school, I'll have some papers there for you to put into your notebooks. Okay, so don't worry, there's nothing to worry about. But if you have the paper, take the notes now. All right, so it says we take a break from the, anybody? I can't hear you, but hopefully somebody said the A word that we can't say right now during Lent. So I'm gonna spell that out for you, Alleluia. And I know I went fast, but I'm holding it up. That goes on that first line. We take a break from the blank. Okay, and then the next little dot. So there's a little circle that looks like this on the next line. So you'll see it here, right there. And it says, during the year, we sing the blank before the blank at blank. Anybody? So we sing the, that we can't say, before the gospel at Mass. So those are the words that you're going to put in that first little circle. We sing the, during the year, we sing the blank before the gospel at Mass. The gospel is all 4 gospels. What are they? Hopefully you said Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The 4 gospels are the stories of Jesus' life. So when Father reads the gospel, he's usually the only one who can read the gospel. Sometimes Deacon will read the gospel, but usually not one of us if we're at Mass. It's Father or Deacon. So when he reads the gospel, it's Jesus' words usually, or something about Jesus' life. So we stand up and we sing this word to show how happy we are that Jesus gave us his word. Because how else would we know him? We can't really hear and talk to him all the time. We can talk to him in prayer, and we can listen in prayer, but it's hard to hear his voice, his actual voice. But he gave us his words in the gospel. So when Father reads those words, we sing, ooh, that word, to show how happy we are. It's a word of praise. And that's the next little circle. The next little circle says, Alleluia comes from the blank word blank. Anybody know what language it comes from? Maybe you said Hebrew. If you did, 3 points. I don't know why it's 3. It's just what I chose. And the Hebrew word looks very similar. I want to make sure I'm spelling it correctly, and I'm not. Okay. And I'm not going to say that word either because it sounds an awful lot like the word we're not allowed to say during Lent. So it comes from the Hebrew word this. So you see that H there? Oftentimes in other languages, the H is kind of like some languages it's silent. And frankly, I really don't know how to say this word. You know who would know how to say it? Father Rotian. He's pretty awesome. He knew all those languages. Do you remember talking to him in your classes? And he would come in and he would say, oh yeah, this word is from the Latin word this and the Hebrew word that. And I was like, what? But here they are. The A word we're not allowed to say during Mass comes from the Hebrew word blank. This is the Hebrew word. So in Hebrew, that's what they would say. And it means praise Yahweh. Anybody know what Yahweh means? Do you remember Yahweh? Yahweh is the word that Jesus gave us for God, Yahweh. So it means, oops, my P is a little bit lopsided, but it means praise Yahweh. Oh my goodness, I can't spell this evening. It means praise Yahweh. So there it is. So we are all the way, I should be writing it on here too, but we are all the way down at this part where it says A right there comes from the Hebrew word, and then write the H word in there. And then the next little square says it means praise Yahweh. Okay? I'm going to put it in there. And that's a term of great joy. Can you see that? Okay? All right, let's move on. So a term of great joy. And then I like this idea. The next circle says, we blank from the so that on Easter it can rise up just like Jesus and add to our joyful celebration. So I'm going to write those words in and then I'll show them to you. I'm going to write them in here. So we fast. We talked about fasting in the beginning of Lent. Fasting means giving something up. So we kind of take that beautiful word, that beautiful blank, blank, blank. We take that beautiful word and we hide it away and we fast from it. And it's a sacrifice because that's such a beautiful word and it means praise God, praise Yahweh. But we put it away and fast from it so that once we can say it, it's like, what? It's back. And how beautiful it is because we haven't heard it for the longest time. It's kind of like us being in our homes again. Someday you and I are going to see each other at school again and we're going to be like, yes. And I'm going to give you high fives and I might even give you a hug that I can't give you now because we aren't allowed to hug right now. give you hugs and high fives and have a party in our classroom. And that's how it is with the blank, blank, blank. We put it away, we can't say it, and then on Easter Sunday, when we can pull that A out, we'll be like, yes. All right, so we fast from the A so that on Easter, it can rise up just like Jesus. Rise up just like Jesus and add to our joyful celebration. Okay, so I'm going to hold that up for you. See if you can see it in there. Okay, so there's the word fast. We fast from the A so that on Easter it can rise up just like Jesus and add to our joyful celebration. Did you get it? If you didn't get it, go back and pause it, and then you can write the words, okay? All right, next we're coming inside, and we have this little square. Do you remember in some of our note-taking, how I show you that when we take notes, like here are our 4 big points, and then inside, if we come in and underneath this big point, we have 2 smaller details that have to do with this big point. Okay, so we have 4 main ideas, and then when we come in here, we have something little to say about that main idea. So here we're talking about fasting from the word so that on Easter, it rises back up. That word rises back up and joins in our joyful celebration, just like Jesus did. So now we come in here and we say something a little bit about that main idea. And we're going to say, instead of saying this word here, there it is, instead of saying that word, anybody know what we say before the gospel during Lent? We sing glory and praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm not going to sing it for you. We all know how I sing. God loves my singing. I know he does, but I will not subject you to my singing. So instead we say glory and praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So I'm going to hold that up, and if you need to look at it longer, pause it. I'm not going to hold it up for as long. So if you need it long, pause the video and you can copy it. All right, let me get it set for you. There you go. Copy that in there. Okay? All right. So the last main point, the circle with the blank space inside, the white space inside, it says the A comes back at the, don't say Easter Sunday, because it comes back one little time before that, and it's on the Easter Vigil. Vigil is a word that means like the night before. So Easter Vigil, we're watching the night before. Vigil comes from the word, or it's part of the word meaning, or that, not meaning, part of the word vigilant. Okay, vigilant means to keep watch. I'm vigilant. That means I'm watching and I'm waiting and I'm not looking away. So the word vigil, Easter Vigil, we're waiting. We're waiting the night before Jesus rises. And then boom, Easter Vigil. Easter Vigil is a really cool service. We're going to talk about it later during the Triduum talk that we're going to have. That word will come up later. But Easter Vigil starts out really dark, and Father lights a fire in the back of the church. And I don't know if we'll get to celebrate that Mass in the church, but we'll get to watch. And I'm going to be pretty sure that priests like Father Coyle, and I know Father Rodrigo's doing online masses, and I know there's a couple other priests who are doing that, but we'll make it really beautiful for us to watch. And it starts out really dark, and the fire gets lit. The new fire of the church gets lit in the back of the church, and then we all get candles throughout the church, and it's this beautiful dark church with the beautiful candlelight. Candlelight like represents the darkness of the world. The candlelight is Jesus. We're waiting. Here he comes. He's coming. He's going to rise from the dead. And then as we hold the candles, we listen to readings from the Old Testament. Lots of the stories that we already talked about this year, where we talked about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. Remember, and with the chariots and the charioteers following the Israelites, and then the Red Sea splits and the Israelites go through, and here come the Egyptians, and there goes the sea right on top of the Egyptians. And we hear that story, and we hear lots of other stories. We hear the story of creation, and it's still dark in the church. And then all of a sudden, after those stories, we sing the Gloria and the bells ring, and then we hear another Old Testament story, a New Testament story, and then Father gets up to read the gospel. But before he gets up to read the gospel, we don't say glory and praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, anymore. We get to say, oh, I don't have it, but we get to say that word. So it's a beautiful, beautiful service. All right, I am going to fill in the rest of these for you, and then I'm going to hold them up to the camera for you so that you can pause the camera and take your notes. All right. It was nice to talk religion with you. I haven't gotten to do that for a long time. We have some more lessons on some of the traditions in the church during Lent. Next, we're going to talk about the 3 pillars: prayers, fasting, and almsgiving. We talked a little bit about that already. Those are the things that you're doing every week to remember Lent and to observe Lent. And we're also going to talk about the color purple and the purple cloths that some churches put over their statues. And unfortunately, we might not get to see a lot of that this year, but hopefully next year when you see it, and maybe we will. Maybe we will. So keep praying. But if we don't get to see it this year, then next year when you go into church for Easter and all the Triduum services, you can notice all of those things that we're going to be talking about. Okay. All right. I'm going to hold this up. But before I do, I'm going to tell you that you are awesome. And thanks for joining me for religion. And I will see you soon for religion. We'll do another lesson. Okay? All right, I'm going to hold up the notes so you can pause, fill in your notes, and then what I want you to do when you turn the camera off is cut the notes along the dotted line and then glue them into your copybook. So your copybook should look like this. This was our first page, and then we had the number 1 notes, which I don't have with me right now, but the number 1 notes that look similar to these, and the number 1 notes were about Lent being 40 days long. The number 2 notes, Lent begins with Ash Wednesday. And then here are the number 3 notes. Okay? All right, I'm going to hold them up in a good spot so that hopefully you can look at them and copy them, and you can pause the video if you need to. Okay? Have an awesome day, 4th grade.